Hello. Hello, good afternoon. How are
Hi.
you?
Hey.
It's good to virtually see you in a different screen.
I feel like we got quite the intro with our 30-second.
I know. If only every meeting started that way. Anyway, I'm very excited to be here. My name is Natalia Garzón Martínez, and I am here with two amazing people that I love working with, Kevin and Betsy. And I'm very excited for this conversation. I wish I had more spaces to talk about these things. So I hope that everybody watching can appreciate this and can get something out of it. We're going to talk about a lot of things. So I'm very, very excited. But before we get started, I'd love to remind everybody that we can take comments and questions in the chat wherever you're watching, and we'll go through those as we chat together. Also, if you've registered for this webinar, you will receive a nice resource page afterwards with more information and some articles and podcasts and some resources that are tangential and also important to some of the things that we'll be talking about today. And I think we should go ahead and get started. I will pass it on to Betsy, who's going to give us a little framework about who we are if you're coming here, what Purpose Possible does. So, Betsy.
Absolutely. Yes. So before we kind of dive into the topic today, just wanted to let you all know a little bit about Purpose Possible, which is the firm that Natalia, Kevin, and I all work for. We are a consulting firm providing wraparound services for all types of nonprofits, really to help the nonprofits, really any mission-driven organization kind of fulfill your mission and focus on the purpose of what you're doing. So everything from fundraising to communications, organizational development and strategy, research, community engagement, you name it, we can help you with it. And so because we are able to work with so many different organizations, I think we have 100 plus clients right now. I think our conversation right now is particularly important because on any given day, any of us are meeting with folks from various organizations, various sectors of the workforce, and certainly various ages and stages in life. So that's Purpose Possible, and that's kind of why we're here today.
Amazing. Thanks, Betsy.
Absolutely.
So let's go ahead and get started with why we're here. So Age and Work Styles is the title of this webinar. And I'd love to give a little bit of a framework of why this is important and it's different than it has been in the past. So our workforce today, we know that, of course, COVID changed a lot of things about the way that people connect, about the way that people collaborate together. Now we have Zoom and Google Meets and Slack and all these virtual ways of connecting with each other and working together. It's also given us different perspective on flexibility and time management and independence. But also something that's very, very important is that for the first time ever, we have 5 different generations actively working today. So we have traditionalists, baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z. It's the first time it's ever happened. And of course, with a lot of the different ways of working together and then also matching that with different generations and ways of behaving and setting boundaries and collaborating. So a lot of diversity going around, and navigating that can sometimes be complicated. And so that is something that we are very excited to talk about today. So moving on with a little agenda of where we'll be. I find that this is helpful for people watching, just kind of know where we're headed. We're going to start introducing ourselves, our generations, have some some stories of how that's showed up in the past, and also why age and work styles matter. Why is this conversation important in the greater context of the workforce today? And give you some real life examples of things that we've encountered here at Purpose Possible, maybe in other work environments. And then the big bulk of our conversation is going to be discussing our team strategy, which is an acronym for some of the things that we've started working on and doing here at Purpose Possible that have been really, really helpful for us in managing this multi-generational workforce and team, and how it's going for us. This is intended to be an informal conversation, but also one where you can hopefully take some strategies that you can, again, like Betsy said, put in practice and wherever you are and whatever work environment you're in. We will have a little bit of time at the end for Q&A, but we are reading you and we're reading your comments. So as we are chatting and sharing things, please feel free to drop in your questions, and we will get to them as we talk. So let's get started. Yay, this is who we are. We just want to introduce ourselves and say, what generation we identify with. I'll go ahead and start. Like I said before, my name is Natalia Garzón Martínez, and I am Gen Z. I was born in 1997. I realized you don't have to say when you were born. You just have to say what generation you identify with. So, Kevin, do you want to go?
Sure, I'm willing to say when I was born. I'm on the tail end of the baby boom. So 1960 is when I was born. I was actually born when Eisenhower was president, believe it or not. He was a lame duck. And so I try not to feel like a lame duck myself. I came into the workforce in 1983, which was a recession at that time. I have a corporate background. So I worked for many years for Delta Airlines, and great career. Very structured. And I went on from there to work in sports marketing. We had a sponsorship in the Olympics, and that led me into a consulting work in sports, which was great. Worked on that in the World Cup and some other things. And then eventually gravitated towards consulting in fundraising for economic development and ultimately Purpose Possible. And so I want to caution everyone I am within that bracket of the baby boom, but I have to say I identify as a Gen X person. So I'm not as representative, but I do have some insights that I think are very boomerish, if you so to speak.
I love that. Betsy.
Yes. Hi, I'm Betsy Oliver. I'm Director of Fundraising Services at Purpose Possible. I was born in 1981. And so I think officially that makes me an elder, or even sometimes I've heard it called geriatric millennial. But some people say that that's also the cusp of Gen X. So I'm kind of right there at the beginning. And I started my work career in 2003. And
I love it.
I am
Well,
20 years later. So
crazy time.
Yep.
I wanted to start this conversation acknowledging that we're all coming from very different backgrounds and experiences and amount of time that we've been in the workforce. And so I'd love to hear what your first job was like. How different was it? Maybe just a quick kind of description of what that looked like, and how is it different from today? And I'll set the context for this. I have never had to work in an office 9 to 5, mandatory. I started going to work right after the pandemic. So this is kind of the norm for me. And I realized that's not the norm for a lot of people. And so I'd love to hear just a little snippet of what that was like for you.
Yeah.
You go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go quickly. So as I mentioned, I started working in 2003, which was 20 years ago. So it was not a great economic time. It was just 2 years after 9/11, obviously. So it wasn't great, but I worked in development at an arts organization here in Atlanta. I was the development associate, which was a really nicer way to just say I sort of did everything nobody else wanted to do. And I think that the experience was so different than working now. I mean, there was, the expectations of the 9 to 5, and certainly being there, and less about the community maybe of where you're working and your colleagues and their interests and things like that than I see now, which I think is that's a great improvement. I know we talked about we chatted about this earlier and said an anecdote, and I remember one thing that my boss told me is he said it's super important for you to know what color how to make my coffee, and that it should look like the color of a manila envelope. That's how much creamer it should have in it. And I don't imagine that people say that when to folks starting out. That's maybe not part of orientation anymore. So
thank you for sharing that, Kevin.
When we were discussing this, I mean, since we have, I've given this so much thought, and I think this is a really important question, because what I've concluded is that the point at which you enter the workforce is actually imprinted on you as to what your expectations are about your job, what the world is like. And that really is like with you for your whole career. So as I mentioned, I graduated from college and entered the workforce in 1983. And the question you had for yourself was not what's my most fulfilling career and job. It's like, am I going to make enough money to eat, and have shelter? And so I worked in Manhattan in a call center for Delta, 2-hour train ride each way. This is the classic back in my day story. $1,000 a month before taxes, and a quarter of that went to my train ticket on the Long Island Railroad. But I was able to make a living barely, and to me, that was success. But that's something you carry. We hear about the people who grew up in the Depression, and their early life kind of dictated the rest of their life. Yeah. And it has for me too. So I'm grateful for everything since that. It was a very, very hard job. But it does kind of affect your perspective on the rest of your career and what you do for a living.
Absolutely.
Life.
Yeah, and it speaks so much to the way that, when we're working nowadays, we sometimes don't think that all these people that we're working with day to day come from these different perspectives, and maybe what success was like, what boundaries were like when you started working. So that's hopefully some of the things that we'll talk about today. So I'd love to move on and talk a little bit about why this conversation matters today. I think we have some interesting conversations that can come out of that. And I love the comment I just saw. Ingrid said, I love the synergy that comes from cross-generational teams. And we do too. So these are just some stats of why, I think this conversation is important. Some things, like some of the stats that we see here, like the amount of millennials that are going to make up 75% of the workforce by 2025. We have another one. 1 out of 5 people in the U.S. will be retirement age in 2030. And by 2035, we'll have more people in the U.S. over 65 than under 18. And apparently that is the first time that has happened in history. So these are some stats just in relation to age and how those things are changing in the U.S. And then we also have some other stats related to workplace conversations, workplace interactions. So 36% of Gen Z or younger millennial workers, so that's under the age of 32, have reported experiencing age-based discrimination at work. 62% of adults age 50 plus in the labor force think older workers face discrimination in the workplace today based on age. And this is the crazy stat for me. We see those numbers, 36, 62, and only 8% of organizations actually include age in their DEI strategy. It's so fascinating to me that we show up with our age, with our generational thoughts every day. And yeah, it's for some people, it's not that big of a priority. And so this, I think, puts us into the perfect framework for why we're having this conversation. Purpose Possible has started thinking about some of these topics. And one of the processes that we are currently going through is, we just wrapped up, was having focus groups of different focus groups for different people that identify in different ways, and having conversations about how those things show up in our day-to-day work and what we can do to make that a better environment, a more inclusive environment, a more collaborative environment. And of course, Purpose Possible has so many people from different ages, different backgrounds, different sectors. And so we had these really, really fruitful conversations. And one of those conversations was actually about age and work styles. And this is a lot of the anecdotes that we have and that we'll be sharing with you today come from those conversations that we had. And I'd love to hear a little more and have you both share some of the things that came out of that. I know that for me, it was very healing, and it was very eye-opening to hear some of the things that you shared. And especially, I work with Kevin in multiple projects. I work with Betsy as well. And hearing this from you all was really, really important to me. So let's get started. Kevin, I'd love for you to go first and tell us a little bit about how you feel that age shows up in your work today, and some of the tidbits of information you can share with us.
Sure. Well, let me just kind of remind people that I'm just one person, put this in context, representing an entire generation. What I've observed, what I feel is out there is that, the way we work, someone my age might work with other people. It falls on a spectrum. They can be either very threatened by someone else that they're not familiar with and the way they do things, or, and I like to include myself in this end of the spectrum, and they can be very energized by it, learning new things as well. This is nothing new. I think generations kind of have a history of denigrating the one after them for all the wrong reasons. You hear things like, well, that's not the way we did it. That's not the way we do it here. And those are really, I think, expressions of fear, like fear of being obsolete, fear of being replaced. And, in many cases, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But on the other end, I think that there's so much to learn. And if we are lifelong learners, I find it very exciting to have different perspectives from different people of different ages is stimulating. It's educational, no matter how old you are. And I've really enjoyed that. And, I think part of what I can do and what I want to do is help others succeed. That's my sense of fulfillment. And we learn from each other. Nobody has a monopoly on knowledge in the workplace. Everything is changing so much. And that can be both scary or exciting. And that's a choice, I think.
Yeah, that's so important. I think one of the most fulfilling experiences that I've had actually in my time at Purpose Possible has been working with you, Kevin, because I think you definitely bring that energy of just wanting to teach, but also wanting to listen and wanting to learn. And that is something that for me, I think my age shows up in that way a lot. I think there's this tension between leadership and also mentorship for me, where a lot of times I am in a space where I am the youngest person, and a lot of the work that we do is client facing. And so I am going into a client meeting and I have to be the leader and tell them, what I think their strategy should be for the next 5 years. And 5 years ago, I wasn't working. I was in college. And so it puts a lot of pressure sometimes for me, and acknowledging that. But at the same time, it also allows me to find new avenues for leadership and what that leadership can look like for me. And finding mentorship, what I was about to say, is related to you, Kevin. I think there's a very beautiful idea that mentorship can go both ways, and that I can be a mentor to you in some ways, and you can be a mentor to me. And that kind of connection is so fruitful, and it's so generous. It's starting to change, and it's very exciting to me.
Thank you. Thank you, Natalia.
Yeah. Betsy.
Yeah. I loved hearing that, by the way. That was so true. So great. I think we're all learning from each other, and it's what's helping our firm a lot, but also what's so important about these conversations and how intentional we are about them. So I think for me, it shows up in a couple ways. One is sort of my stage in life, maybe more so than my age, but I think it's similar. As I'm at a director level, and so my job is very busy and time consuming and fulfilling and satisfying. And at the same time, I'm at the age where I have 2 elementary age children who are also very, very busy and very fulfilling also. But and so the I don't want to say balance. I can't use that word. There's no balance, but the just trying to the juggle can be difficult and can cause of parenthood and working in a kind of a senior level position, and it can cause I think guilt, stress, and so just working that out is something that I have that it's a kind of a constant challenge. I don't want to say it's a struggle because I think it's a challenge. And I think that we at Purpose Possible have found such a great way to find community and be flexible and hear each other and be open to the times where I have to say, y'all, I got to step out. I got to go carpool, but I'll be back and things like that. And I think having that, the willingness and the comfort that I can say that has been a huge help for me. And I think on the other side, sometimes kind of like you said, Natalia, being at this stage in my career, where I am managing people or working with people on a kind of a level, a senior level, who might be older than me. And at first that can cause kind of that same, just like you said, Natalia, when you're going into a client meeting and you're certainly the youngest person in the call or in the room, but you're advising them. That's what they hired you to do, is to use your intelligence, your expertise, and your skills. And I think it's the same way. And it caused some discomfort for me internally at first, but I've really learned to see it more as a partnership. And like you said, it's kind of a two-way mentorship. And that has been such a great thing for me. I think having empathy for everybody involved, whether it's somebody that's younger than me, older than me, my age, whatever it is, I think that is key to really this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I'd love to share is I remember during the focus group that we had, Betsy, you and I were talking about so much of what has changed with boundary setting nowadays with remote work. One of the guilt that I felt around being young, and a lot of my colleagues have big families and their parents, and they have, responsibilities that look different from mine. And a lot of the tension for me was coming from, if you say that you are not available because you have to pick up your kids from school, and I am also not available because I have another priority that I want to do after work, then where is the balance in that? And not having conversations about it, I think, creates even more kind of isolation and lack of understanding and lack of empathy for what the other person is doing and what they're doing outside of work and just what the priorities are for them. So I feel like this is really, really important context for us to go into our strategy of some of the things that we have been, what happened after these focus groups, right? So after these focus groups, we said, okay, we have all this information. We're multi-generational. We want to collaborate. We want to understand each other. I will say the biggest takeaway from those focus groups for us at Purpose Possible was how excited people were to keep talking about this, which I think to me says everything. Everyone wanted to have more conversations. Everyone wanted to know more and listen to each other and learn about other people and what their priorities were. And so this is how we came up with the strategy of T.E.A.M. And each letter means something. I love a good acronym. So we're going to go through each one of these and kind of chat about what that's looked like for us at Purpose Possible and what that's doing for us now. So let's start with track. So tracking, what we did was just build systems to ask people about their work styles and preferences. We have so many meetings during the day that honestly, if someone says something during a meeting, I may not remember it afterwards, after my 7 other meetings. And so we decided to create a Google form, sort of a survey format for people to answer just some questions about their age and how it shows up, their work styles, their preferences. And we had each person just fill that out individually. And this was a really fun process for me. Coming up with the questions was exciting. I think for many reasons, but one of them, I think my generation of Gen Z and younger people, is that we think about work in a very different way than maybe past generations. So for us, I will set my boundaries, and if I'm not working at that time, I'm not working at the time, and it comes easy to me, and I'm comfortable having these conversations. And so a lot of these questions came from that. So I'd love to go through these 4 questions that I put and kind of get your thoughts, Kevin and Betsy, on what it was like for you to fill this out. I feel like a lot of questions were important. I never thought of them and given tangible examples. But I'd love to hear how you felt going through that process. So one of the questions is, how do you protect your time during the workday? What is important to you outside of work? How do you like receiving feedback, and how soon? And what is your favorite part about working on a task project? So as you'll see, there's a little bit of a balance between what you do outside of work, how do you set boundaries just as a person, but also how do you collaborate? What's important to you about project work? How do you want to receive feedback? So any and all thoughts welcome. I'd love to hear more about your experiences sharing, answering these questions.
Well, let me grab that second question, because I think it's so important. I like to think of work as there's a job for your head and a job for your heart. And it's really important. Ideally, some people can do it's the same thing, but that's pretty rare. But we're all in pursuit of some sense of fulfillment and happiness, and so it's important to have that balance in this case, to be able to express yourself or do what you need to do for fulfillment. And so I think that's really important too. And the fact that that's part of this survey, I think, is really a recognition of you as a whole person. And so I appreciated actually being asked that.
Yay.
Yeah.
I agree. And I think it shows, first of all, this survey was so great. And I really encourage everyone out there to adapt this method of communicating with coworkers, clients, team members, cross-sector team members. But I thought it was really great. And I agree, Kevin. I mean, even just asking that question shows I feel like we've come a long way. And having a lot more listening and care for our colleagues. And I think what struck me the most is, how do I protect my time during the workday? Because probably to no surprise of either of you or anyone who has seen my calendar, I thought, gosh, I don't. I don't. There is, if you need, and in some way that's just part of my position in working with so many different people at the firm. But it really made me think how I should. If that question is there, then probably I should. And so I think it's so important to think about, just to think about that. And I think even these questions and taking something like this survey and sharing it with your coworkers, just the act of doing it is so important itself.
Yeah, I think prioritizing even the existence of this document is important, exactly. As Kevin was saying. And I'm looking at the comment. Yeah, active listening and empathy are valuable and in working through these challenges. And to me, the survey was exactly that. It was just an opening and an invitation for everyone to, again, fill this out individually and just sit with the questions and see what comes out of that. And now that we finished the survey, we filled out our questions, we answered everything. Then we moved on to the next letter, which is E, for express. And this to me is the most important one. And even this webinar is, I think, E, expressing this to people listening and just normalizing a lot of these conversations that even thinking about, Betsy, the story you shared about your first work experience, right? The coffee color. I think a lot of these spaces don't normalize these conversations, but although these conversations may be a little uncomfortable and different, it doesn't mean that they're not fruitful. So prioritizing time, right, within your company or your organization or wherever you work, in whatever setting that is, and really create intentional spaces to have these share outs. And as I said earlier, Kevin and I were in multiple projects together, but this is sort of when we were testing out the survey and having these conversations. And I was so fascinated by us going, we split our screen. I had my survey on one side, I had Kevin on the other in the team. And we just went through each question. We're like, okay, how do you protect your time, Kevin? I protect my time. And then I shared, and how do you like receiving feedback? And these questions, I mean, even to me, entering the space where Kevin is the lead in the project, to hear how does he like to receive feedback, which is important, no matter what team you're working with, but also to have a space for me to tell him, this is how I would like to receive feedback. And it was a great experience. I'm a big fan, but I'm going to let Kevin share what his thoughts were and what his experience was like.
So regarding meetings, we talk about that. Should I get into that a little bit?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is, I think, one of the things that I've been able to bring to our group. And, you know, we're consultants. So we work with people who have come to us to basically solve a problem and give some clarity to what needs to be done. And so having that structure, something like biweekly meetings, which we do with our clients, is really important. It gives them structure. It gives them clarity. It takes something that might be very murky and kind of brings it makes them feel more comfortable with it. So that's a real value that we bring. And I think it's just basic project management, having deliverables, having a timeline, you know, clear responsibilities. Those are useful. And I think that kind of plays into how we interact with each other. So we have different expectations for each other, and it kind of paves the way for sharing feedback in a comfortable way and, you know, in that context of that project. So I found that to be really helpful. We also do have our own internal check-ins, which I think are really good because we can be really candid with each other. I use the example of it's like being in the clubhouse of a team.
Yep.
There's no reporters allowed, and we can say what we want. And it's a bonding opportunity. It's a chance to really kind of laugh about some things and share some insights and you know, get closer on the same page with that project. So those have been things that really work for me. And it really, I think, comes down to trusting each other, caring for each other, and having really open communications.
Yeah, that's so important. I remember when we had this conversation too, what I felt was an interesting difference in how we want to have these conversations. I remember you, Kevin, expressed that you wanted like a face-to-face, you know, Zoom, Google Meets check-in, and that was important to you. And I think for me, maybe it's because I don't know, Gen Z, I text and I Slack and I feel very comfortable just having to check in and using all my emojis and, you know, and that feels normal to me. But I appreciated that Kevin expressed that need, and he expressed that that's something that's important to him. And so we started having these check-ins, again, 5 minutes. But it was really, really beneficial. And I think, again, going back to how are we learning from each other, this cross-generational, it was beautiful to realize, like, oh, it's kind of fun to check in just after and see, you know, people laughing. And it's so important. I'm seeing a comment here asking questions like, how do you like to receive feedback? Yes. And other questions. This is so true, Catherine. And maybe we can talk a little bit about just quickly about feedback. I think it's very, very important to highlight that. I know that I like receiving feedback at any time, whenever, however, if it's a call, if it's Slack. But how did you feel expressing this? Especially, I'm thinking Betsy and Kevin, you're both in managing positions or director positions. How did that feel for you in sharing that with others?
You go, Betsy.
Yeah, I think that it was, I mean, it honestly, again, just asking the question, is so appreciated. I think at least again, I'm elder millennial. I think I was saying elder. That's important. No, I'm just kidding. But as an elder millennial, that wasn't something that I think that was asked of me ever in my earlier positions. It was just there was one way to receive feedback, and that was maybe an annual review and sit down with your boss. There's not it didn't matter what I what I thought, and so I think just the act of having that as a question was really thought provoking, frankly, and maybe didn't think, gosh, how would I? Maybe just a one-on-one, and maybe a quick phone call, or do you want it right away, or would you rather sit on it, or and so the fact that Purpose Possible takes so much time to think about that is so impressive to me, and again, a model that I would strongly encourage and recommend to others. But
yeah, it's so true. Kevin, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think as you think about age too, many people in my generation, their identity is so connected to their work, to the point of where feedback can be something that is, they might perceive that as an attack when it's really not. And I think collectively we're a lot healthier now. We can make those kind of separation of like work is not everything we are. And so when there is feedback, it's not necessarily meant as any kind of criticism of you personally. It's all about helping you do better. Now, I will admit that at my age, there is a little bit of a sense of, I should know this already. I should, like I'm supposed to know. And I've struggled with that. But I think when you're with people you trust and you care about, it's not an issue at all, because it's all about learning, and we don't want to stop learning. So, I would say, and I think there's a lot of people at my age group who have that same kind of, like, they feel like they should know, and that's something to struggle against.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that, because to me, from my point of view, I almost feel like the weight of knowing, but sometimes being in spaces where I say, oh, but I shouldn't share that because I'm so young. Like, I'm the youngest person here. Like, what do I know? So it's kind of a flip the other side of it. And I think creating these spaces for teens to express it actually creates comfort, and it builds trust, so that in other situations you're more comfortable sharing this again and talking a little more about it. And I want to share something that happened with Kevin too recently with another client. Betsy, you were also there. We were at a dinner, and we were discussing a project, and the client was chatting, kind of brainstorming, and I had an idea. And I didn't feel comfortable, again, youngest person there, I didn't feel comfortable sharing that idea with everyone. And so Kevin was next to me, and so I shared it with him, and I said, Kevin, what if we did this and this and this? And Kevin said to me, that's a really good idea. You should share it with everyone. And I still wasn't interested. I was kind of shy, and I felt, again, just in a different environment. But so Kevin, actually being aware that he was the lead, and that he had sort of that command of the room, when it was his turn to say something and he was part of the conversation, he actually created that space for me. And he said, oh, Natalia actually just had a really good idea. Like, Natalia, would you like to share it? And that was already enough of an open space for me to feel comfortable, because Kevin had kind of led me into that position of leadership. But I don't think we would have had that moment had it not been for all of those other times when we met to talk about our work styles, to talk about how we show up. One of the questions in the survey is, are you more of a captain, or are you more of a team player when you're in client-facing situations? And if we hadn't had that conversation, maybe that moment wouldn't have happened. And I wanted to ask you, Betsy, going back to some of the thinking this in a little bit of a big picture. A lot of the work that we do is with nonprofits, different sizes, different sectors. And one of the things that you do at Purpose Possible is client services. So I'd love to get a little bit of a bird's eye view on how you think expressing, tracking, kind of building these systems, how is that incorporated into our client services, client care, and what can people take with them if, say, they're working at a nonprofit, maybe how they have a different, setup and structure to how they work together?
Absolutely. Well, I think the story you just told really is exactly what I was going to say, which is kind of the modeling, right? And, we've heard that for a long time in our career, like, oh, don't answer emails after such and such because you want to show that you're, as a manager or as a director or whatever, that you model that kind of those boundaries. But I think it's more than just that. I think it is about setting, for example, if we're starting with a new client, really kind of setting out from the get-go at the onboarding, maybe even earlier, kind of some of the things that we might do to protect our clients, our consultants' time, or even maybe suggesting our clients work with us to fill out a survey like this. How do you like to, how do you like to communicate? Do you like to text, or would you rather have a phone call? And I think we do a lot of those things with each new client to sort of find out those patterns. And I think the other thing that's important is for maybe a director or a manager, again, to step in and have that tougher conversation, maybe with a client or with whomever it might be, for y'all, with on behalf of a more junior member, and say, we really do kind of stick to the 8 to 5 or time frame, or just something like that could be difficult. Kevin kind of making some space at the dinner conversation to make sure that Natalia could share that really great idea and get full credit for it. And I don't mean that we are that because we're older or something, but sometimes just having that space as a director or a senior member gives you that opportunity to sort of shepherd that that work style conversation in a more comfortable way than maybe someone more senior could. And I think it's really important that we do that as directors.
And I think, part of this is pushing yourself, getting out of that comfort zone, doing it repeatedly so you're more comfortable, you get better. It's like public speaking. I mean, you get better at it every time you do it. So, and you're more confident. So that's really the thinking behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. I also love all the comments we're getting and all the interaction we're getting. We're reading all of them.
We are reading them. This is great. Thanks, y'all. Keep it coming.
It's very exciting. Again, it's kind of mimicking the results that we got from these focus groups. It's just that people want to talk about it. People are excited, and they have their own experiences and their own thoughts and boundaries and all of that. So this feels like a really, really good point for us to move forward with our next letter. So again, we've already tracked, we've already created spaces to express, and now this is the fun part. We get to adjust things, and we get to work together to find balance and shape collaboration in some ways. And so I really want this section to be just tangible examples, because I think we can get led astray. But yes, it all sounds great. We all want to collaborate and be, feel empathy. But what does that actually look like? And so we have some tangible examples. Kevin, do you want to get started on maybe receiving feedback or anything that has been a tangible example of how we adjusted working together after having some of these conversations?
I want Betsy to go first. I have to think about this. I'm sorry.
No, I don't need to.
Okay. All right. So as a leader, I mean, I think I was kind of like doing two things at once. One was really kind of learning as I went. But I mean, I think that coming from that kind of classic command and control background, there's really, to me, there's three ways to lead. You can lead by force, so-called leadership. You could lead by coercion, and you can lead by example. And leading by example is the most effective way to do that. But you've got to be actually able to connect with the person you're leading by example for. And it becomes their choice. It becomes something where they want to emulate you. They want to follow in your footsteps, and you're doing what they're doing now, but you're also doing what you want them to do in the future. And so to me, kind of looking at the span of my career, that's been the most effective way to actually lead people. It's about influencing them in a way that it's their choice. It's not something that you're making them do. It's something that they are motivated to do on their own, and you're leading them in that direction.
Yeah, I love that. And I remember one of the conversations that we had earlier on when we started expressing and creating these spaces was just a lot of the admin work, how we're going to split time doing things if we're working together. I remember saying, I love formatting. I love if it's going to be bold and italics, I love that. I'm a visual person. And so I said to Kevin, I want to be the person doing that. But then Kevin, as the lead, he said, okay, I want to help you create these agendas before we meet with a client. And so what that conversation looked like was he would send me a bullet point list of the agenda items, and then I would put that into the format that I liked and that made sense to me. We also had another colleague, Caroline. She was the one that chose to share her screen. And that was something she felt comfortable with that maybe Kevin and I didn't. And so together we were kind of creating this beautiful mix of these are the things that I like doing. These are the things that I'm comfortable doing, and adjusting accordingly. I feel I'm also trying to list other tangible examples, but I think Slack is a big thing, and that's I feel has been a big change. I saw someone in the comments earlier asking about Slack and remote work, and a lot of these conversations were actually I'm going to check Slack once a day, or Slack is distracting to me. A lot of folks that are neurodivergent may feel like that takes away from their ability to focus. And so that's also important to understand. So again, changing, I know that Betsy likes Slack, or that Kevin likes Slack, or that if I have another colleague, Taryn, she likes Google Spaces. And so we create a Google Space that makes sense for her. And just acknowledging that if I tell Kevin, after 5, if you send me a Slack, I don't know, I will read it in the morning. But so then he asked, so if I send you, for any reason, if I'm working late and I send you a Slack, is that going to bother you? And I said, I have it deactivated. I won't be notified. It's not a problem. But maybe for another person it would be, and they would feel like they have to answer. And so again, it's just about asking these questions,
the communication,
and listening to what people are saying. Any other thoughts around that?
I did just see one person was asking how people of different generations use Slack. And I would say it's basically a social media for work and for anyone who hasn't used it. And I'm still adapting. I mean, I think it's useful. It's informal in a way. So I think
it's a messaging platform.
Right. Right.
Messages
right. So in that sense, it's been good. There hasn't been anything that I've used in the past like that. So I kind of like it, but I'm still getting used to it.
I want to make space for Betsy too, if you want to share anything about how that adjusting has gone for you and some of the takeaways that maybe people can get from you today.
Yeah, so I think that again, I think boundary setting is important. And that can be from anything from, marking your calendar. And this is kind of a do as I say, maybe not as I do, but I need to, to take other people's advice and do it. But I know a lot of our colleagues do such a great job of marking their calendars, blocking off time, even for lunch. I notice that people will say, I say even for lunch, that's not like, of course for lunch, but I tend to have a lot of meetings during lunch, but I notice some of our coworkers will block 30 minutes and it'll say just, lunch, I'm stepping away. And I thought that's brilliant. I should do that. Or Ingrid, you said the same thing, block time on your Google Calendar that just says, I'm going to focus on, just follow-up work or whatever, non-meeting times. And I think things like that are really important too. And it's great to put that on your calendar, let your colleagues know, and just, understand why that's important as well.
That's so true. And it even, it connects to a lot of these conversations about age and generations. There are so many tools that exist today for you to create boundaries and to block time. And if that's something new to you and you haven't practiced boundary setting, I am 100% sure that someone around you has. And they can help you. And if you need help understanding how to deactivate notifications after work, that's something that people can help you with. And it comes back to something that you said, Kevin, that I found so important, is that we're lifelong learners. And with a lot of these changes in technology and how we work and how we collaborate, there's so many tools that we can use, and asking and changing and adapting is not wrong. And in fact, it's good. And it makes us stronger, and it allows us to build teams and to really just get to know the people that we work with in a way that's going to make everything more productive and welcoming.
And I think it also makes, I think it's important for us to do this because it also makes us, again, review our own, our own, like you said, we're lifelong learners, right? I might think that my way is works for me. This is so great. But maybe I think, wait a minute, look at all these people who block time for lunch. There might be something to be said for that. And instead of judging or kind of automatically in your mind, you might have a little twinge of like, oh, I have meetings every day at noon. How do they do that? I think there can be, especially for older generations, even millennials like me, elder millennials, there could be a little bit of judgment, not to total honesty. And I think that that's something to really think about. But all of these conversations, all of these, the openness of our team and of Slack and of shared calendars has really kind of, I think, at least for me, been a great way for me to kind of take a step back and learn from some of these aspects of boundaries, time management, work styles, all of that. So I think
it's and I even going back to something you said earlier, Kevin, you said you lead by example, right? And I think Betsy, you being a director, and I've seen this in action and in practice with a lot of the leadership at Purpose Possible. It's just about setting an example, and it doesn't mean that the example that you set means that everybody else has to do what you did. It's just about setting the example that it's okay to have different ways of setting your boundaries, and that it's not the director does this, so I have to do the same thing. No, it's the director is aware and talking about how they set boundaries. That means that I am also welcome to do that. And a lot of that is, I think, has been accomplished by a lot of these conversations that we've had.
Absolutely.
But it leads us to the last letter in team, which is M, and it's just maintaining. You continue to share, you continue to discuss these topics. The more you do it, the easier it will become. Again, this webinar, I think, is a good example. If someone had told me that I was going to be having a webinar with Kevin and talking about this, I never would have believed it. But I think a lot of the conversations that we've had have just allowed us to build trust and to communicate and to feel comfortable in that. I put some little notes here to just be mindful of what does it mean to maintain. I think a lot of it is acknowledging that change is normal. I think it was one of our colleagues, she said, I filled the survey out last month, but I actually changed something. I like to, receive feedback in a different way. Well, that's okay. Then you can update, and it's okay to change, and it's okay to find new ways of working and collaborating. Another thing is asking again is not wrong. If you forget, oh no, how did Natalia like to receive feedback? Well, you could just ask. And it's okay. And we have to just give grace to our colleagues that one survey, one conversation is not going to do it all. And now, Betsy is like the best manager ever and everything is perfect. It's just, what we're learning, and it's a process, and it's humbling but it's important. Any words of advice or thoughts on maintaining?
I think the change that we've gone through over the last few years has kind of like really stirred things up, for better or worse, mostly for better. I think because we've been forced into situations where we need to adapt to each other. It's not like everyone is a captive audience in an office building anymore.
Nope.
And can be told what to do. We have blended our lives in a way, or at least part of our lives. And so we've become more demanding, and I think this is a good thing, more demanding of what we expect, in our work life. And and I think that's healthy. It's part of change, but we've
Yeah.
also hopefully we've developed collectively a higher tolerance for change, because of the last few years, what we've been through, hopefully it's not going to happen again for a while.
Yeah, very, very true. We have about 5 minutes left, so I want to be mindful of, making some space for Q&As. There will be a recording of this. If you registered, you'll get a resource page, and we'll also have information on how to contact us. If you want to talk more about it and connect with us, then you can. But we've had some questions. This is from Olivia. Would love to hear more about generational differences in opinion regarding remote work. How have you seen organizations like yours and the nonprofits you work with address this? I'll try to say something. One of the things that I've noticed is that a lot of these conversations don't exist yet in the space. And expressing to me has been the most fruitful sort of step in that team strategy. Setting the example, as Betsy was saying, with a lot of our client service work is starting the conversation with, hey, this is how we at Purpose Possible navigate these problems. This is how we navigate these tensions. This is how we set our boundaries. And I think nonprofits coming from, it's a sector where you have to work all the time. Work never stops. And a lot of that is productive. But I think being okay with asking these questions is probably the first step that's important to me. But I'd love to hear what you all think.
I would say that I have not seen the kind of, with nonprofit organizations, I've not seen the kind of like mandatory FaceTime that you hear about on the news, with Google and other big companies. So that's not something I've seen as much in the nonprofit sector, where you have to be at work. So I think that, I am of a generation that has worked full time, in person at an office. There was no other option. I remember when working from home one day a week kind of was something people started to talk about, and it was like, oh, that's exciting, And now I think that, we've all seen that really, it's often up to the team or even the individual. But I think, that people have adapted that way, but
I think there's almost two questions in here. So generationally, I haven't seen a whole lot of difference about the embrace of remote work, other than I think the older generation has boundary issues, and they may think that they're home and that's their office now around the clock, and it's not. So, there needs to be a kind of a clear definition there between, your personal life and your work life. And it takes longer for older people to get that, I think, sometimes. Organizations, I think they're so diverse, so it's hard to kind of say that there's any real pattern yet on it. But I do hope that organizations move more towards, I would like to see more in-person, a hybrid offering as the optimal way. But it's got to be something that the employees want. It's a worker-centric world now, not a customer-centric. And they need to actually, they need to adapt to what their workers want. And that's the most important.
Absolutely. I think I saw another question about any strategies on communication feedback preferences for boards. I saw that, and we only have 1 minute. I feel like that's a whole other webinar. But I do want to say that the important thing about feedback is understanding how people want to give this feedback. Is it a survey? Is it a focus group? Is it a face-to-face conversation? And adjusting the way that you're asking the questions to a format that makes sense for the people that you're trying to receive feedback from. To me, that's like the number one strategy for that.
And I think for a board, the key thing to remember, obviously, is that they're volunteering, right? And so it's not something that they have to do, for their employee HR file or something like that. I mean, you want them to do it. So how can you do it in the way that makes it easiest for them and quickest for them to provide that feedback? Obviously, still thoughtfully so, but in a way that is, again, quick and easy. I think
they can digest it. Yeah.
Yeah. The survey.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. We were right at 1 hour. So again, thanks to everybody that joined. Thank you, Betsy and Kevin, for having this incredible conversation. I care about you both, and it's just so beautiful to have the space with you both. If you have any questions, our emails are on the screen. You can go to purposepossible.com to learn more about the work that we do. And you'll be receiving a resource page if you register for this webinar. We'll also be posting the live recording of this as well on our website. So thank you, everybody. And yeah, thanks, Kevin, and thanks, Betsy.
Thank you. And thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Bye, y'all. Have a great day.
Bye.